Hello everyone, Anthony from Grandstand Sports Data here. In today's video, we will be answering the question, how do I pick my sports bets? What I will do is walk you through the most common process by defining each step and also demonstrating with an actual slate of games. This video will help you whether you are a sports betting newbie or a veteran of the handicap and sports world. So let's get into it. So first we have to break down the sports bettors and who they are. There's usually three common sports bettors. There's the sharps, there's the squares, and then there's the advantage sports bettor. If you are just another average person in the sports betting market and have no system selecting bets, you will usually lose in the long term, and you would be considered a square. Now a sharp is someone who is experienced in betting and wins in the long run, while an advantage bettor is someone who is much more intentional than a square but hasn't won in the long term yet, so they're not necessarily a sharp. Before we start the bet selection process, we first have to know what makes a good sports bettor. So below is a list of the characteristics that makes up a sports bettor. And it should take you from square to advantage. And if you work hard enough, you might then become a sharp. I would look at these as like the muscle groups for a bodybuilder. For you to compete in Mr. Olympia, all the muscle groups have to be a 10 out of a 10. If you want to be considered a sharp bettor, you will have to have these selective categories become a 10 out of 10. So what if you don't want to be Mr. Olympia? And you just want to live for a long time and feel athletic, whether that's with your health or in the sports betting world. You still will have to feed and exercise all of these muscle groups that will make you an advantage sports bettor. So let's start with the first one, which is research. This is your fundamental and technical analysis. You have to be good technically with coming up with scores or projections or just having statistics ready in order to have those scores and projections. You also have to be good at the fundamental side, factoring in travel for your competitions, factoring in coaching, factoring in what's happening between the ears of the player. It's not just about the numbers. Next is the forecasting, and this is when you predict the outcomes or narratives of the competition that you're in question of. Next would be eliminating. You have to eliminate games that have too much volatility. Next would be identification. So this is games that will win if your forecast is likely to come true. So based on your forecast or your prediction, you're going to eliminate games that are too volatile and maybe vary in terms of results, but you want to identify the ones that you're confident in. Next, every good sports bettor is good at shopping for odds. This is a necessity in the sports betting world. You can't just have one bookmaker. Next would be recognizing. You have to recognize what games you have an edge in and what games you don't. Next, and probably the most important, is bankroll management. Having a smart betting budget, plans for that budget, and then goals for that budget is probably the most important thing for a sports bettor. A sports bettor, for instance, that comes in with an $1,000 bankroll should not be betting 500 a game. You have two consecutive losses, which happens a lot, probably more frequently than you think, and you have zero. Next, and probably the second most important, is record keeping. You have to track everything. There is no shortcut for this. You have to track your bets, you have to track your edges, and you have to track your bankroll, which is your financials. Okay, so Anthony, What does this have to do with the bet selection process? Well, I want to note that the color codes for each of these characteristics as we move on are very comparative to the bet selection process. So here's the bet selection process. You first start with your opening handicap. And this is the researching that we said that you had to be good at. This is when you look at the slate of games for your respective sport. You spot the matchups you like and also the teams and players who have had your attention. Next, you're going to forecast a result. This is your technical analysis. This is when you predict the most likely scenario to happen in each game. The next step, eliminate and identify. You want to eliminate games that have both a high volatility in your forecast, so you don't have much confidence in which way it could go, and a low differential to the odds, which means that your number, say if, for instance, you bet on spreads, if your spread that you predicted is close to the spread in the books or with the bookmaker, then that's a game you might want to throw away. Identifying possible bets with low volatility in your forecast and high differentials to the odds. So the ones you want to identify are the complete opposite of the ones you want to eliminate. Now, you're going to want to continue this step throughout the process. So which brings us to number 4, your fundamental handicap. This is the opposite of your technical analysis. This is what's in between the player's ears. You want to know what's going on in his mind. You want to know injuries. You want to know the matchup. You want to know the schemes. Weather plays a part in certain sports. Coaching, traveling. Travel plays a role in almost all sports. Crowd and the motivation behind the teams. After you completed this handicapping, you want to eliminate and identify again. And that's what I meant by continue with that step throughout the whole process. Number 5 would be your odds shopping. This is when you use your multiple sports books, or you can call them outs, to find the best odds for your identified bets. So you've identified the bets that you like. Now it's time to go odds shopping. And now number 6, we'll apply betting budget strategies to distribute your bankroll to select and place bets. So you want to use the strategies that you use for your budget, whether that's I do 1% of my bankroll plays, 2%, I do units. However you do it, that's how you'll distribute your bankroll in a precise manner. Lastly, you're going to record keep everything. This is track the results of your action and your forecasted slate. You want to track everything. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, on to the first step, which is your opening handicap, and it leads into your technical analysis. This is when you look at the slate of games for your respective sport or competition, you spot the matchups you like, and the teams and players who have had your attention. Now this step is based on what type of a handicapper you are. Do you bet spreads? Do you bet money lines? Are you an over-unders type of bettor, or do you like props? So for instance, the slate on the right is going to be our demonstration going forward. We're just going to do spreads in this demonstration. So for the demonstration, the handicapper we are is a spreads bettor. We like to bet the spreads. Now if we were a props bettor, what I'm trying to say is that this demonstration or this graph would be no use to us. You have to find the right slate, and it has to have no betting information on it. Some different handicappers, or I would say types of sports bettors, will go about this process in a different way than others. So for instance, as you can see, a modeler may update the model to his most recent statistics. He's not going to use only weeks 1 through 5 for a week 8 slate. No, he will update to the most recent statistics. So he will probably have the team statistics from weeks 1 through 7. An experienced sports bettor, maybe somebody who's not too computer savvy and uses maybe yellow, those yellow notebooks still, and is doing his chicken scratch, he will have power ratings. And he'll update those power ratings just like the modeler will update his statistics. The beginner, and someone who I'm going to assume would be the viewer in this video, and who I'm going to walk through the demonstration with, would find the slate of games for your sport of interest, but with no gambling information on it. So just like this that you see on the right for the Week 8 slate is what you would find if you're a spreads sports bettor. Now, you can also do it for money lines. You would get the same slate because it on the left is your away side or your away score, and the right is going to be your home score. So since you have this type of a slate, and if you project a matchup on this, you'll be able to find the spread. You'll be able to unlock the money line, and you'll be able to unlock the over-unders once you put your score in, and then once you compare. But we'll get to those steps. So the next step would be to forecast the result. So you're going to predict the most likely scenario to happen in each game. What I try to tell everyone, whether it's a modeler, it's an experienced bettor, a beginner, no matter what, is that you want to think in your head, if this competition was played 1,000 times, what would be the average result or the most likely scenario? So modelers, to make this easier for themselves, they would run a Monte Carlo simulation. And this, some handicappers will do 1,000 games, 500 games, 7,000 games, whatever gets you to that center point in the most likely scenario. So through my experience, I would recommend about 500 trials. That will give you, on average, what will most likely happen. Now, the experienced sports bettor, he's going to apply his power ratings to determine his score and spread on the matchups. The beginner now, he's going to think about if the competition was played 1,000 times in his head, what the most likely scenario would happen. That's going on to my first point. That's basically the question that's being answered throughout, no matter if you're a modeler, experienced bettor, or a beginner. Now, what you also must do when you're projecting your matchups is you're going to put your confidence level in terms of how confident are you in that score. There's some games where you say, hey, this game could be a 40-point blowout, but if it's played like this, it could be a very close game. Well, if you're thinking that in your head, that's very high volatility, and you're not confident in that game. So next we're going to apply it to our demonstration of the forecast and results. As you can see from the slate, we're going to have our away score for the away team, which on the top would be Baltimore 28, and then we're going to have our home score, which would be Tampa 23. Now, when we were coming up with this result, we had a confident level of 1. We weren't too sure about the confidence level in this game. It could have ended 28-23. We might have had some that said 34-3. We might have had some that had Tampa winning 24-23. The outcomes varied. Also, what we noted was the spread that we came up with. So the spread we came up with is this is the home team spread. So as you can see, Baltimore 28, Tampa 23. It's a 5-point difference. It's a plus. We have Tampa as a +5 underdog. If you look at the one below, matchup below, it would be Denver 20, Jacksonville 26. So we have Jacksonville as the favorite at -6. So far, as a spreads bettor or a spreads handicapper, we have our confidence level and we have our spread. Now, these are just our spreads. Remember, we have not compared any odds as of yet. We are just going by our forecast. So what's next? We have to eliminate and we have to identify. So now the elimination process, which is probably the most, not the most important, but it's in terms of selecting bets, you want to eliminate more than you want to identify. Why? It's the old adage, a penny saved is a penny earned. You want to eliminate games that are based on both high volatility in your forecast and low differentials to the odds. What does that mean? Remove the games where you are less confident in your result. So from what you've seen on that previous slate, we had a confidence level, and there were numbers 1 through 5. Number 1 being the least confident, number 5 being the highest confidence. We're going to want to eliminate games probably 1 and 2 with the confidence level of 1 and 2. Then we're also going to remove games that are close to the gambling odds. So remember, we had spreads and we had Tampa at a +5. Now, if we check the regular odds and it says Tampa +5, we want to eliminate that game because it's too close to the betting odds. We have no edge. We have no advantage in placing that bet. So if it's close in terms of the spread, we'll eliminate. If it's too far down the line in terms of confidence level, we want to eliminate. So what about identifying? Well, what we want to do is we want to identify possible bets by low volatility in your forecast and high differentials to the odds. Well, what does that mean? It's the exact opposite as eliminating. You want to highlight the games where you are more confident. So those confidence levels of about 5 and 4, you want to keep an eye out for them. 3 is borderline. I wouldn't yet eliminate it, but I wouldn't yet identify it neither. I would just keep it, in the finance world, we would say earmarked. Just put a pending next to it. You want to highlight games that are very different from the gambling odds. So remember that +5 that we have with Tampa? What if we check back in the odds and it has Baltimore at a -3? That's a very different spread than what we have. That's a game that we might highlight or either earmark. So in this step, this is when we're going to introduce the available gambling odds. So we're not going to compare all of the books. We're just going to get some odds, wherever we can find them, just to compare and contrast, because all the odds are relatively similar in terms of where you get them, but we'll get into more of the precision or sniping of those odds later on in the selection process. Okay, so here's the demonstration in terms of eliminating and identifying. The first column, we have our confidence level still. And remember, we said we're going to eliminate the 1s and the 2s because we feel least confident in those. Next is going to be the spreads. We have our spreads from the forecast that we made in the previous step. Now we're going to compare it to the actual odds. So for the first game, if you can see Tampa and Baltimore, we had it at a 5, at a +5 for Tampa. Now the actual odds of the actual spread was a +1.5 for Tampa. So our projection varies or doesn't come too close to the spread, to the actual spread. As you can see from the right, it has it at a 3.5 difference. Now, I want to point out in this column, this is the volatility to the odds. Our forecast to the actual odds. The ones in yellow signify that it is close to the actual spread that we have. So our spread compared to the actual odds, it is relatively close. Where when you see the green and red arrows, we're actually away from the actual odds. So going back to that eliminate and identify, If our odds are volatile, that's a good thing. We highlight those. So those would be the green and the red arrows. Now the confidence level, if those are low, we eliminate. Those are the two steps. So now going forward, we've just eliminated games. We've eliminated all the yellow games, the yellow arrow games. Those are the games that were too close in terms of our odds versus the actual odds. All of them have been eliminated. Now one green has been eliminated. And that's because the confidence level in that game, remember, was a number 1. And the ones that were kept were 5s all the way to 3. So all the 2s and the 1s had been eliminated. And now we are identifying these next 5 selections. The next step, we have to fundamentally handicap. Now this is injuries, matchups, schemes, the weather that affects the game, coaching, travel. It's anything that's not statistical. It could be statistical, but it usually happens between the player's ears or the competitor's ears. So this is for the remaining games. You're going to perform a deeper handicap on elements that cannot be measured. This handicap is more of the mental aspect and what goes on in the competitors' minds, whereas the technical analysis is more numbers driven and statistics. This is when you ask yourself these questions. Are these variables the reason for the high volatility of my odds compared to the market? Or does the variable favor my line, or does it favor the book's line? And then never forget that you have to perform another elimination and identification step after you complete the deep handicap. So what this means is, does the variable favor my line or the book's? So in this illustration, you would say, you would take injuries into account. So from the first eliminated game on the bottom graph, it looks like New England and the New York Jets have been eliminated. Why? Just from that first fundamental analysis, this is week 8 in the 2022 NFL season. When we were doing this fundamental handicap, the New England Patriots did not know who their quarterback was going to be. It was between either Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi. For something with Mac Jones was probably the second to worst passer rating in the league at that point, where Bailey Zappi was moving the team and had close to a 90 passer rating. It was too much of a variable that made us shy away from the game, so we eliminated it. The New York Giants and the Seattle Seahawks, we had the Giants winning in Seattle, which kind of went against what we thought in terms of Seattle with their motivation, with their crowd. New York was traveling different. New York was just had a game a few weeks before that in London. Then they had an away game, and then they had to fly to Seattle. So basically 3 away games in a row. The forecast did not match the fundamental handicap, so we eliminated that game as well. That's more of what the question that you are asking yourself. Does it favor your forecast? Is it giving you basically another layer of, argument in order for you to bet the game? If it doesn't, and it's going closer to the spread side, which is the actual odds, if it's favoring those numbers, then that's when you want to stay away from the game and move on or scratch it off of your ticket. Next is odds shopping. This is when you use multiple sports books to find the best odds for your identified bets. You want to make sure you have a number of books to choose from. These are also known as outs. So a sharp sports bettor usually has 5 or more outs or bookmakers to choose from. The main priority here is to find the best odds for your identified bets. Some people may say, oh, there's not much of a difference from, -1 to -1.5 in terms of a spread bet. And in the short term, in terms of a daily betting, it might not. But in terms of a long term, when you're placing over 1,000 bets in a year, it makes a huge difference. So you must note that odds may change in favor of the markets. What you want to see is if you still have that edge. And is this game still worth betting on? Okay, so for our demonstration, we have 3 identified bets. To the right, and what has been added to this demonstration, are the bookmakers. We have Bovada, BetOnline, BetNow, DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM. So we have all of our outs, more than 5. In the first game, we have Miami winning by 8 against Detroit, when the spread is +3 for Detroit. So we are betting Miami. We have an edge in terms of Miami winning by more than the spread. That is the actual odds. We have the game being by 8. The actual spread is by 3. So we are getting our best odds at -3.5 at -110. And the green are highlighted, showing you that these are the best or the better odds. Why are they the better odds? Well, if you do -3.5, getting the same number as those other books, you'll be paying a little bit more juice at BetOnline with the -112. And the same thing with Bovada. Now, if this number was different, say if it was a -2.5 or a -3, then you would start to think about whether this was the better bet. Now going down to the Green Bay Buffalo game. We have Buffalo winning the game by 23, whereas the line has it set at 11. Well, all of these books have the game set at 11, except for FanDuel. They're giving you the best odds at 10.5, so that's a half a point less, and it's at the same price as everything else, which is -110. That is basically a no-brainer for us. The better odds for the same price. Now the last selection, we have Cincinnati winning by 14 over Cleveland, but Cleveland only being the underdog by 3.5. So we have a huge advantage for Cincinnati. For Cincinnati, they're all pretty much the same. Or they're all pretty much different, sorry. The -3 at -120 at Bovada. Same thing at BetOnline. The same thing at BetNow. But as you get to DraftKings, you can get the same number for the better price, which makes DraftKings already better than the other 3, or the previous 3. Now you can get a 3.5, which is not as good as that 3, and for the same price. So DraftKings will still be better than FanDuel. At least you'll get that 3 and get a push, whereas you got the 3 here, you lose. Now BetMGM has you with the -3 and the -110, so it's the same as DraftKings. And your selection would come between DraftKings or BetMGM. Now another discussion for another day would be maybe you bet DraftKings for your first game, and then you bet MGM for the Cincinnati game. That way you have all your bets, properly proportioned throughout your outs. Now, Why does that make a difference? It might not make a difference in terms of this type of a game, but if you're a futures player, it would be good to have a future on DraftKings. And then if you wanted to hedge sometime, say if you had the Rams to win the Super Bowl and the Rams were in the Super Bowl, you could hedge that bet at BetMGM and bet the other team, and then that way you're basically making a profit no matter what. That would be that strategy. But that's a different argument for a different day. That has nothing to do with the bet selection process. That's more of just a tangent I went on. So the next step would be apply your betting budget strategies. This is when you distribute your bankroll to select and place bets. So how do you split your bankroll up? So there are several ways to do this intelligently, but a million ways to do it wrong. What you're going to want to know is your bet sizing. Are you a flat better, which is someone who bets the same amount on every game? Are you a unit better? A unit better is, do you bet 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units on however you feel confident in terms of your selection? Are you a percentage better? Do you take your whole bankroll, say if it's $1,000, and bet 1% on regular plays, 2% on ones you feel more confident, and 3% ones that you feel even more confident? Do you use Kelly criterion, which is usually it's a equation that selects the bet size according to the risk involved? Most bettors will use a half Kelly, so it's basically you split that final answer in the Kelly criterion in half, and that will give you your betting size. Either way, the goal here to using the betting budget to efficiently allocate your bankroll across all your identified bets. That's what the end goal is. So we've selected the 3 that we wanted. We've received our odds, the best possible odds. Now we have a $5,000 bankroll. Now this is just for this example, and it's just showing you an illustration. We have a $5,000 bankroll for the NFL. And we are percentage bettors. We would like to do 1%, 2%, 3%, all the way up until 5%. In this game, we feel the most confident and got the best odds on the Green Bay Buffalo game, so we're going to give 5% towards that. Whereas our second most confident game in these identified bets, we would do the 4% for Cincinnati. And then the 3% for Miami, which we got close to the odds that we wanted, but we had a high confidence level. Now this is basically your own preference in how you split up your bankroll. Just like I said on the previous slide, it all depends on your unit better. If you're a flat better, all of these might be the same size. They might be all $150. They might just be 1%. So where you're looking at about $50 per bet. Whatever your process is, that needs to be applied in this step. So the last step in the process is record keeping everything. You want to track the results of your action and your forecasted slate. The goal of record keeping is to track 2 elements. You want to know your performance and you want to know the bankroll. This is going to tell you, are you winning or losing? It's also going to show you if you're more successful in one type of bet compared to others. So remember, when we went back to what type of a handicapper you are, if you were a spread, moneyline, and over-unders, you like to do all 3. This process will show you which one you're better at, which one you're not so good at, and the adjustments that you need to make. Also, you want to factor in or track what systems or models are working and which ones are not. Maybe you have a model where you keep a spreadsheet of free picks you receive every day. And then the consensus pick on there is the play that you want to make. Keep track of that 500 times. That way you can get an accurate reading on how well that system works. Also, you want to know your weaknesses and recognize your strengths. So this will help when you're eliminating and identifying bets in the future. So if you see, hey, on this spread, I keep losing in this particular spot, you want to keep track of that and then make sure that that's part of your eliminating process. So right here, this is where our slate has turned into and where we're going to place our bets. Our bets have already been placed. So this is what we're going to record keep. The record keeping is going to be the shaded areas. So you're going to see our confidence level, that's shaded. What does that mean? So when you track your bets and record keep, you want to know your record when your confidence level is at a 5. So when you put the result of this bet, maybe it's in Excel or however you track it, when you put, if there's a column here, put a W or an L, it's going to tell you you're either 1-0 or 0-1 in terms of the confidence level of a 5. Then you'll have another trial. So maybe you lose both bets and you're 0-2. Well, when your confidence level's at a 5, you're 0-2. That's why that's one variable to track. The next would be your spread, your forecasted spread. You want to know your record and how well you do on games where you have an 8-point spread, a 23-point spread, a 14-point spread. You want to know your record for each of those spreads. Next, you want to know the actual odds and the actual spreads. You want to know your record against the actual spread. How am I in terms of games where the home team's the 3-point underdog? What is my record against an 11-point favorite? Again, you're going to want to know the difference, and this is probably the most important one. If you wanted to leave out these two, you would still need the difference because that's what's going to show you what your odds are versus the actual odds. That's basically your edge. And you finding out that number in your records compared to that number are very crucial when selecting bets. Next, you're going to want to know the odds that you selected. This is pretty much the reason why you want to do this one is because it's going to be different from the actual odds. You can see that the odds have actually moved. This is a -3.5, where it was a 3 at one point. Same thing here. This was a -10 when we selected it, but it was once at a -11. And finally, you're going to want to know your record compared to your bankroll. What is my record when I place 5% plays? What is my record when I place 4% plays? And so on and so forth. Now, if you're a flat bettor, you may not use this because your flat bets, they're all the same amount. So it would be really inconvenient and time wasting if you were to do that. But if you're a unit bettor, 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, percentage bettor, Kelly criterion, you will want to track this variable. And all these variables will show you, what your results are, where you're weak, where you could be better. Now remember, this is only a spread demonstration. So you're going to have more variables if you play over-unders, if you play money lines, if you do props. You're going to have either different variables, more variables. It's all the type of handicapper you are. That's what basically the main premise of this illustration and presentation is that whatever type of handicapper you are is going to be different applications or variables. Next, you're going to want to forecast or record keep the whole forecast. So this was our original forecast. You're just going to want to track the confidence level and you're going to want to track the spread. That's if you're a spread bettor. Now, just like I just previously said, if you're over-unders and if you have more variables, you're going to have more tracking. But this is what you would track if you're a spread bettor. You want to track the whole slate and how you do. Well, why would you do this, Anthony? Like, it doesn't make sense. Well, it does. Because what if, for the confidence level of number one, you're hitting at like 70%? Well, you never played them because they're a confidence level of number one. So you always scratch them off of your slate. So if you never record kept them, you would never know that you hit it at 70%. So from now on, when you are handicapping games and you put a 1 for a confidence level and you're hitting at 70%, it will probably be a good play and you're not reading the board well. But it will still make you money. So you don't want to miss out on that. So this is the repercussions for tracking everything. You want to know, you're basically seeing what your forecast, how well it does, and you're also seeing how well your performance and your bankroll are doing. So this concludes the presentation. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you like this content and would like to see more, make sure you subscribe. And also hit the like button so this content can be spread across YouTube. Make sure to share with a friend if they enjoy the same content as you. And finally, I want you to comment down below any questions or concerns you might have on selecting your bets, and I'll be sure to answer as many as I can. So again, I'd like to say thank you and see you in the next one. Peace.